Park brake still on? Park brake works.
Park brake works. 1955 Pontiac. Cool car. So this 1955 Pontiac Star Chief is a really nice car. Automatic transmission with a 4-barrel Carter carburetor. This thing goes down the road just fine. It came in for a major transmission leak out of the front pump. We're going to be pulling the transmission out and rebuilding it, but we wanted to verify engine integrity before we pulled the transmission out, because if there's anything wrong with the engine, we'll pull it out, we'll fix it at the same time. I've got the spark plugs pulled. I'm going to do a compression test. If they're all even in decent numbers, we probably won't do much with the engine. If we find something with a low cylinder, then we will also do a cylinder leak down, which will tell us what's wrong. It'll identify ring failure, burnt valve, or head gasket failure. I don't think we're going to find any of those things, but we want to check it to make sure before we set this car up for driving. So I pulled the spark plugs, did a compression test. Compression's not too bad. This thing in 1955 was like 8.5 to 1 compression, so it's not going to make a lot of compression anyway. It does have one cylinder that's a little low. I did a cylinder leak down, and it may have a burnt valve. We're going to fix the transmission for now, and then this winter this car is probably going to come back. The engine's going to get pulled out, and then we'll address either cylinder head issues or a complete rebuild. But for right now, we're going to put the rack onto this thing. We're going to throw it up in the air and start pulling this transmission out of this 1955 Pontiac Star Chief. It's not going to be as easy as most modern cars, but we'll tackle that as we go and figure out what needs to be done. This is my first time pulling a transmission out of a 1955 Pontiac. It is a BOP bolt pattern. This engine is basically the granddaddy of all Pontiac V8s. They basically used this engine design all the way up through, I think it's 86 when they finished off with the with the Pontiac 455. So should be interesting. We'll see how it goes. Transmission rebuild time, 1955 style. This 55 Pontiac Star Chief is actually a very clean car. Floor pans, rockers, all the metal on this is original steel. It has had some interesting exhaust work done to it. The exhaust is full of holes, so we're going to be redoing that. They also normally, your exhaust on this, the driver's side manifold goes under the engine, ties into the passenger side pipe, and then both pipes come out in one pipe down this frame rail and out the back. So in old hot rodder style, somebody used a flame wrench to open up the window in the frame rail on both of these X-frame members. Effective. Not necessarily the best thing for the structure of the frame, but we'll address that as we go on. There's really no other way to run this exhaust except through windows in the frame, because this frame it's got two parallel bars and it's got an X through it. And on this side it actually has the heater box over here and the heater lines run down, so you can't even run the exhaust through on this side. Good old-fashioned probably 70s dual exhaust. Pair of cherry bombs. Well, I'm going to start pulling this exhaust out. They routed the exhaust under the drive shaft, which is interesting. You can see where the exhaust has been rubbing against it depending on its situation. You can also see on the floor where the drive shaft has been rubbing against the floor because this thing sits so low. The springs on it have completely sagged out. It gives it a cool stance, but it's probably not the best for handling. Well, with that, we're going to pull this transmission out so we can get it rebuilt, make sure that it doesn't leak fluid all over the floor anymore. Ow! Got to get the transmission out of this thing, and probably been 20 years since I've pulled one of these trannies out, and the last time I did this it was on a 389 Pontiac Catalina, and as I recall I had to pull the engine and transmission out together so that I was able to separate the two, because this has a center bell housing and it has to be out of the way for you to get all this stuff apart. I'm going to try and do it with the engine in the car. I guess I like challenges, so we're going to see if it can be done. I've never been able to get one out in the car, but in the Catalina it was too tight and I wasn't able to rotate the bell housing around. This one has a little different suspension system than that Catalina did at the time. I think the Catalina was a 59 or 60. Looks like this engine will pivot down pretty far, so I'm going to try and pivot it down, get the center bell housing out, and get all the 32 or so torque converter bolts out. So we'll see what happens. Worst case scenario, I got to put it all back together, then pull it all out as an assembly, and then separate it. So hopefully I'll get lucky and get this thing out without having to pull the engine out. That'll hopefully save me a bunch of time. So as I continue removing parts from this car, I decided to go ahead and drain the torque converter. This torque converter actually has a drain plug in it, which is rather nice. So we'll let that drain out. We'll finish pulling our torque converter to flywheel bolts out, and then we're going to cut out our exhaust because it's garbage and rusted through. Once all our torque converter bolts are out, we will undo our cross member will support the engine. And then hopefully we can sneak this center bell housing out of here and separate the tranny from the engine. Well, I've got my shift and throttle linkages disconnected. I've got my 32 torque converter bolts removed. I'm getting ready to remove my transmission cross member so that I can hopefully get this bell housing out of here. I'm going to go ahead and cut the exhaust off because it's all rusted out, and then I'm going to see if I can talk the owner into letting me put some Lakes pipes on this because they would look stellar on this car. But we'll see where we go with the exhaust as soon as I get this thing going back together. Well, it's time to modify this exhaust, and by modify I mean remove it and build a whole new exhaust because it's got holes in it and it's pretty bad. So, time to modify it. Oh, I'm gonna end up wearing it. Good clean. It's a shame it dumps a quart of oil every time you torque it. Hey! I didn't even end up wearing too much of it. Get that finished draining out. Time to get this cross member out of here. It's not going in the way I want it to. Pull you out. Down, like that. That'll work better. Maybe. Give me a little more. There we go. Cross member coming out. Grab my transmission mount bolts. So now bell bolts and bell bolts. I'm feeling lucky. I think we're going to be able to get this out. Whenever I'm supporting an engine underneath by the oil pan, I like to use a block of wood that goes all the way across the bottom. That way I don't dimple the oil pan right in the middle. 2x4 just wide enough is a handy tool to have laying around. We have a bunch of 2x4s of different sizes that we use for different stuff depending on what we need it for. So it's time to pull 2, 4, 6, 8 bell bolts yet. 1, 2, 3, 6, 7. Already got the 2 on the top. And I got 2 there. Let's pull these guys loose and see if I can rotate this housing around and drop it out the bottom. Need that guy out of the way though to do that. Positioning forward a little bit more. Support the engine. Pull some bell bolts. All the same length. Always want to pay attention to your bolt links. Make sure you're not going to put something back in somewhere that shouldn't be there. So all my rear bell bolts are out. We got 2 more left on the front bell. I'd say I'm having fun. I'm not sure I am yet though. We'll see whether I win or not. It looks like everything will slide back far enough that I'll be able to just drop it straight down. These dowel pins are a solid inch or so long. But I think it'll come out just far enough to be able to drop it straight down. Hey. Oh, no. Gotta get that guy out of there too. Got the pilot in the center that sticks out forever. All right, pilot's out. Hey, winning! So this old Hydromatic is ready to go over to the rebuilders. And get reconditioned so that when we put this all back together, hopefully it won't leak all over the place. But that's a story for another day.